Okay. Welcome, Owen. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. How about you guys?
Pretty good. So for those listening at home, this is Owen Legget. He is the owner. You're the owner, hey, EST Barbell?
Yep, yeah, co-owner myself and Jacob. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. A co-owner of EST Barbell in England. We thought we would get Owen on. Bit of a chat about our coaching styles and bit of philosophies and training, because I think we're going to be seeing you at Worlds in Malta this year. So as well.
Yeah,
So
hopefully.
talking about the prep all round from everyone. But
Yes.
yeah, to kick us off, tell us a little bit about yourself and your coaching philosophy and EST Barbell and how it started and stuff like that.
Oh, well, we'll go into sort of how it started. So, we launched in June 21. So actually relatively new on sort of the scene as a company as we are. But how it sort of came together is my background is personal training, face-to-face coaching out on the gym floor, qualified as a PT at 19. I'm 27 now, so have been in and around for a long time and in the sport since 2016, and essentially wanted to bring the sort of quality and professional standards that we saw in like general pop personal training, like that more mainstream sort of area of the industry, kind of into powerlifting, because we looked at powerlifting whilst it was great, and there was a lot of good individual coaches, that professional brand and business that you'd go to, like, we want to work with this business, right? I'd known Jacob, who is sort of my business partner and sort of one of our other coaches, for a couple of years. At that point we trained together, and it was during lockdown 2, so obviously we had the 3 lockdowns sort of over COVID came together, and I was like, look, this is what I want to do in powerlifting. Do you want to do it with me? And kind of use that time we were sat in our houses to plan everything and come together. So launched and pushed. It was just myself and Jacob. Again, doing things how we felt was like the right way. So putting out content, supporting with me, volunteering, things like that, because we saw a lot of, and you may see this in Australia as well, a lot of coaches take, and like we make money off of this sport, like it's like coaching, it's like we should put back and be a positive influence back on the sport, whether that's through refereeing, whether it's spotting and loading. And we see a lot of coaches who potentially complain about the standards, and don't actively put backing to help this. And it's like, okay, well, it helps everyone if it's better, right?
I think that's something where Australia's doing okay at, but we definitely, I know Steve and I are working to put into the sport even more, but Australia definitely needs to continue to put into powerlifting for sure if we want to get something out of it, I feel.
Yeah,
100%.
definitely.
I think that's the case in most countries, right?
Yeah, it's like I've got athletes in Germany right now and in Singapore, and they can't find places. Both of them can't find places to have nationals.
Oh shit!
Nobody wants to have it. Both of those countries are struggling. So it's good that your brand is putting into the sport, for sure.
Yeah, I think it was kind of just something that was really important to us. Like I said, both me and Jacob are referees. I think we're gonna try and get Ben to do his referee exam. So I'm gonna put him out. I'm gonna put him out on blast publicly and say, as like, Ben Paper's gonna do his referee exam. And I think Hannah, our junior coach as well, is looking to do it. Like, again, if we can all kind of like put back in positively and help that standard grow, that was something that was just really important to us as a brand, because even on a purely business sense, like the sport gets bigger, it's a bigger pool of potential clients for us, like things like that. But also, like, we all just genuinely care and like the sport.
Yeah, definitely.
And we wanted to be able to do that. And obviously it was a crazy sort of first 12 months from sort of that June, because it went from being myself and Jacob. And I think when we launched, I think collectively across us had like 7 clients that we classed as like EST Barbell clients, because I was still face-to-face personal training. And then sort of 12 months down the line, obviously, so we brought Ben and Hannah on board as well. And it's just, both the social media had gone a little bit crazy, like client numbers have been crazy. It just blew up, which I really put credit down to doing things the right way, or at least how we felt that, which was, again, being a positive force back in the sport rather than just taking.
The growth of EST Barbell with online coaching is super similar to with Perth, and the way that we've grown in the last year with online coaching, for sure. Doing it right on social media is a big one, and making sure that you're setting the standards with the coaching standards. I think the biggest thing for us is making sure that the coaching standards are as a higher standard as what we are able to humanly deliver. So
yeah, 100%.
How long has EST Barbell been around for then? Only a couple of years.
So yeah, I mean, EST Barbell, like in its current form, is we launched in June 21, so sort of a year and a half.
Yep.
But EST was like my personal training brand prior to like EST Barbell. We kind of I was like, we want to relaunch, we want to rebrand, like this is what I want to do, like Jacob come in sort of thing. And that sort of EST established sort of beginning. So that's what it stands for. We get that question all the time. It's kind of that homage, like, okay, like we've been here a long time, whilst the company itself is a year and a half. Like I've been in the sport, what now, 6-7 years.
Yep.
Jacob's very, very similar. A bit of background on him, like so whilst my experience is very face-to-face, and the people skills and the salesy stuff, he's a PhD student at the University of Bedford in the UK. And essentially his PhD, and every time I talk about this I butcher it, so I'm just gonna roll with it. It essentially the applications of velocity-based training for powerlifting.
Oh, cool.
So it's essentially like a powerlifting sort of focused PhD, like the applications of sort of that and the sort of tech around it, and it's super interesting. So whilst I cover the face-to-face stuff, Jacob academically is like sports science undergrad, sports math, like sports biomechanics masters, and then into that sort of sports masters PhD. So yeah, we kind of cover a lot of bases. And then obviously we have Ben.
Yep.
So Ben works with Kelly as an athlete now as well.
Yeah.
And Hannah, who is a junior coach, who's a third-year nutrition student. So that's something that hopefully we'd love to be able to offer, is a bit more of the nutritional coverage once Hannah's graduated and fully qualified as well. So yeah, and that's us really. It's been a mad 18 months.
You sound like a well-rounded team.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think that's something that was almost by design. We wanted to cover a lot of bases, and something that was really important when Jacob and I came together is we were like a genuine coaching like team and actually help each other and help each other's clients. Like I think you might see it in Australia. There may be teams that operate under the same brand or the same header, but don't really have anything to do with each other, or even like semantically, there's like clashes in approach, right, or message that's put out, let's say.
Yeah.
And I saw a few of those, and I was like, I didn't want ES to be one of those. I want us to genuinely be a team and to help each other. And whilst you have your coach, let's say if you work with me, the example I always use is Jacob has more experience than I do with like acute weight cutting, right?
Yeah.
Just through how it's worked out. Generally, my clients haven't really had to do it. I've never really had to do it as an athlete.
Yeah.
So whilst we can go into it, I don't really have the same depth of experience as we start talking gut cutting, water cutting, things like that. Jacob has, whether it's through his clients, whether it's through himself, like when he wasn't bogged down in a PhD, a very good lifter, and had to do it. So I will refer people his way. Have a conversation with Jacob, talk about gut cuts, things like that, right? And that can obviously advance as well with Hannah with the nutrition stuff. And my background as a personal trainer is a bit more like the strength training for pain management, right? With the Gen Pop stuff, a bit more of your PRI lens, a bit more of sort of that stuff. So when he's had clients who have issues that hasn't just settled through sort of your standard, like, right, let's load manage, let's improve this, we've come over and looked at things this way, and happy to do that, like, and collaborated on that. Yeah,
it's very similar to the way we do it. We've just got the exercise physiology team and the performance team. So we used to be quite mismatched when Steve first came on, and then in the last year I've really cut the line down the middle and gone, nah, some coaches don't have anything to do with rehab and other coaches do, because it just doesn't work otherwise. It was a bit messy.
Just foggy, really.
Yeah, it was foggy in the outcomes of what the client wanted. So
it's really good for us now, like to be able to work as a team, collaborate in that way, where we have our exercise physiologist who will come in, have a session with someone who is dealing with pain, and then they can come in there and jump in the program and add their kind of 2 cents to it to be able to help manage it. Whereas I think Kelly and I are in the same boat where we're extremely busy with all our performance athletes, where it just got too much because, you know, if you start going down too far down the realm of rehab and everything, you get foggy on the performance side of things and you start to kind of catastrophize when someone mentions any little bit of pain, whereas you yourself would know that, you know, as an athlete, we're going to deal with a bit of pain and it's okay to be able to push through it every now and then. But we start to think about it a bit too much when we dive too far down the rehab. So having the ex-physicists with us has been really, really good in that sense.
Yeah. So you kind of do the PRI stuff yourself. That's kind of your realm.
Yeah, I've definitely, I wouldn't say I've veered away from it. I do see it holds value, right? But like, I think as powerlifters, like we're not that special, and I'll explain that. Is
we're not that special. We
like we all do the same 3 movements and potentially the same pool of like 30 to 40 accessories and variations.
Yeah.
Right. And then we're either got an active job or a not active job.
Yeah.
And like, whilst there's obviously you've got outliers and things like that, generally the issues that come from those movements tend to come the same. So we kind of create, in my head anyway, there's a couple of archetypes of powerlifters and the issues that occur with them.
Yep.
So when I was with the face-to-face working with general population and those variables were wider, like I'd probably use that PRI lens a little bit more. Whereas with a powerlifter, I'm like, okay, cool. Like we go down those lines of sort of troubleshooting, you probably have one of these 2 archetypes here, right? So we definitely still use it, but I think that model is simplified a lot more in my head in practice working with people. That makes sense.
Yes, it's kind of like if you've got the program right and you're covering all the major joint movements, you're pretty much going to be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're going to hurt yourself if you do something silly. That's about it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So tell us about like the competition in England, because I think from our perspective, we've got athletes all around the world, but we don't actually have many in England at all.
Okay.
Yeah. So tell us, so we don't really know much about the competition in England and what it's like over there. Tell us about the standard and stuff.
So sort of obviously standard of lifting like is increasing at a pretty scary rate. Like the team itself, obviously the men's team just won Euros, which I think if I remember right is the first time they've done it. And the overall standard of lifting is just rising and rising and rising. Obviously we've got the British champs in about 9 weeks, which I think will be really exciting because again, like I think Henry as sort of head coach is trying to really encourage, like whilst we have like our total standards, that we have like the A totals, which is basically on a percentage of, I think it's something, it's based off of the last few years of results at like Worlds, and would like a top 5 finish, basically. That's like your guaranteed a spot. But we've got everyone basically going in to do right. You've got British here because then Malta is, I can't remember how many weeks afterwards, but that's kind of to punch your ticket there. So yeah, it's really like it's going up. Like I look across pretty much all of the classes, bar maybe the 74s. The 74s is kind of like it's a bit of a quieter class. But I look across all the men's classes and even like the women's classes as well. Like the women's team's deep as well. It's a really exciting. It's going to be a really exciting British because I think every class is going to be competitive. And I think generally the standards of competitions as well, like the production of things, like again, there's more companies like EST and sort of you've got Forza as well. Like you have other companies like coming in and wanting to help step up that production of competitions as that appeal gets better. It will only continue to rise as well, right? Yeah,
definitely. It definitely looks like it's going to be interesting to see who's going to get their spot for Malta, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's we shall see. Like again, obviously there's 9 weeks to go. There's a lot. But it's going to be close. And then it's also like I think it will get to a point of like who do you take as well? Because I think again, it's that deep and the standard is that good across everything. Like someone's going to maybe miss out. I think we are intending to send a team to Western Euros as well, which I think will help filter some of that. But I think the issue that the top end sort of lifters are going to start to face is as these higher standard meets start coming through and start coming more, is people are going to have to start picking and choosing. Like, I think we saw a bit of it last year with a couple of lifters. Sort of, they didn't shout and scream about it, but we had obviously British into Worlds, into Arnold's, into Euros.
Ouch.
So
Not many competitions.
It's a lot, and especially if you're sort of, if you pick up a bit of a niggle or sort of some stress in between all of those, because none of them are hot, like low stakes meets.
No,
They're
not one of them.
all like the one to earn your spot at Worlds, a money meet, and then Euros, and the stress on sort of those. Yeah, and Sheffield as well. Yeah, right. So you've got the stress on those top guys and girls. I think as the depth of the class goes out, we'll probably start to see a more varied team going to like each. Because historically it was like your A team went to Worlds, the B team went to Euros, and then we'd send like those people who were like on the outskirts, so like your third, fourth places would get sent to like Western Europeans.
Oh, okay.
Because it'd be a good bit of like, it's not a GB singlet meet, but it's like a bit of a international experience for those guys and girls who are sort of on the cusp of sort of Euros and Worlds. That was kind of what that was used for. I imagine sort of like Commonwealth for you guys. And then is there another one that's like a regional that's not just Australia?
Used to be Oceanias, but we don't have that anymore.
There is something coming back next year.
There's one coming up, isn't there? What's coming up next year?
It's like the Pacific something.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah. I mean, Australia's still at that point where
we're coming back.
We're coming back.
Yeah.
The depth is getting better. We're coming back. We've got to have some time, but it's definitely still, the world's team going to Malta this year for Australia is 100% one of the best, if not the best. That's gone. So in terms of what's coming up, so we are coming. The depth is getting better. The coaching is getting better over here, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think the big thing, if we look around, like if we look at like GB as well, you haven't had that divide that Australia's had, or like the States have had now. You have kind of just always been one big gel, just always been together. So there's always going to have, or you're always going to have more depth, right? Because everyone's always been competing against each other. Whereas like we got our standalone people in certain weight classes that are just so far ahead of everyone because our main rival's gone to another federation or something like that, or they've just stopped lifting.
Yeah. So you don't have USAPL over there at all? They haven't gotten in?
So there are obviously other federations, right? But I think British powerlifting and sort of our IPF affiliate is so like prominent in GB because the attitude pretty much is like, if you're sort of drug free and you're competing somewhere else, why? I think that sort of culture is quite strong, I think, in the UK. I have seen and I have heard mumblings of USAPL England. How far that goes, we shall see. I think anything that raises the standard and forces British powerlifting to kind of step up and go, right, okay, we need to bring something here now because there's a potentially viable alternative. And anything that raises the standards, right? Like that's kind of the way I look at it. But from what I know, I can't see any of our top people being swayed.
Nah.
Yeah. Well, we can't be here, right? Like we're not the USAPL. That's why no one that is the top level really fucking got swayed. We were just like, no. What's the point? Like, why do I want to be a part of USAPL Australia?
Yeah.
Even the name was just like, no, this doesn't make sense.
It sounds like that powerlifting in Great Britain, it sounds like it's quite progressive in terms of the companies or the business owners having a say in how the sport is run. Definitely something where Australia needs to go towards for sure.
Yeah, I definitely I think it's this like, there's sort of the generation of sort of the lifters though. So like myself, like Lewis, who's another one of your clients, like and Ben and Jacob, like we're all kind of similar ages and came in sort of as juniors or like through the university scene and have kind of stuck around and grown up around each other, even if we didn't know each other, right? Like when we've kind of all reached that point of like mid to later 20s where we go, okay, we want to see this move forward and kind of take a more active role in things. Jacob does a lot to help out with the Northwest. So one of our divisions up in sort of the Northwest of England, and they do some great stuff divisionally and sort of with the national comps. I think it's kind of, we're now seeing that whilst we've got, obviously there's the board and things like that, we're seeing more of that younger generation step up and kind of bring that next step forward, try and modernize the sport a little bit more. And I think social media's got a big thing to do with that. Huge. It's such an Instagram heavy sport, right? But I think that has just helped accelerate that, I think, a little bit more.
Yeah, we definitely had an incident here last year with powerlifting, and Steve and I jumped on a podcast and basically said to the whole of Australia, stay in the federation. And I think that, do you remember that podcast? Are you trying to rack your brain around which one it is?
I remember, kind of, just like I just said, I remember saying just like, we got to stick together, there's no point. Because if we start this divide and everyone starts fucking ping ponging all over the place, then we're going nowhere.
I think that did help, because we do have a lot of listeners to our podcast. Otherwise it could have been quite a fractured community there for a while. But it's really good to see that yours isn't, because I think that's probably one of the most disappointing things with powerlifting in Australia, with how many federations there actually is. Because it just gets watered down, but it's coming back. We'll say that again. It's definitely
we're trying to pioneer.
How many are there in Australia then?
You got drug free. You got PA, the old PA still around, and you got APU, and you got USAPL. You got APL. What else you got?
I think there's Capo as well. They got a Capo side.
Capo's got a drug free one. Yeah. It's just it's a lot.
We're not a big country.
No, we're not a big country either.
We don't have a fucking lot of powerlifters.
It's very driven by by the coaches, and where the coaches do put their athletes. So the more that we can get out there on Instagram and keep promoting it, but it's just there is some modernization that needs to happen from our end. But I think it will come, and it is coming. We just have to get over that little mountain to get there, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just time, isn't it? It's just time, and like you say, you get the right people encouraging lifters in the right direction. And that's sort of where it all clicks, isn't it? It's just time. It's just time.
I think
coming back too.
Yeah, I think
it's because we had the split, right?
Yeah, coming back.
We never had the split. PA never gets, we didn't get kicked out of the IPF to start with, and then we never would have had to create the APU, and then this never would have happened, and we would have been this one big collective powerlifting family. But because that all happened, we've just had to fucking start all over again, pretty much.
So much drama happens in powerlifting in Australia. It's all about drama.
So I think that's just powerlifting full stop. We all spend 10 to 12 hours squat, benching and deadlifting, the most monotonous sport out there. Someone find some excitement somewhere, haven't they?
We need to create some drama. Someone has to do something on social media every few months.
We'll just change the bench rules.
Oh, here we go. We'll talk about the bench rules. So have you got any athletes who are not hitting depth?
So yes, but I think the elbow depth thing isn't the issue for the ones I have. So like a few of them are close. I'm like, it's not that deep, and especially because there's not that clarification. I'm like, if you're close enough, I'm not going to stress right now. Like, but the issue I've had, so I coach a girl in the 57s called Kate Baxter, like great bencher, I think like 100 kilo, 102 at like 57 as a junior, like, but she's tiny. And this glute contact rule is an absolute nightmare. Because she's so short and like torso length, limb length, we were playing with foot position, even with her feet like super sort of sprawled out there, glute contact touch is so minimal. It's been an absolute nightmare. Like luckily we've kind of got it to a point where it doesn't affect, like it doesn't affect her arch too much, things like that. Like I wanted to avoid having to use blocks as well, because that's just another variable, right? That we can't really control comp to comp. I was like, we can do it, but like I'll use Turkey for Junior Worlds as example. They had one block. They had one block at Junior Worlds. And it was just like this long, like rectangular bit that wasn't on the platform. So we had a GB lifter come out while she walked out, and she was like, "There's no block," and you can see the spot in the loading crew were like, "What's going on?" And it was kept out the back, and it couldn't be put far because it was just one long block. It was either too far forward, like out in front of the bench, or it had to be underneath it. So I was like, we can try and avoid that. But we've spent a bit of time. Like I've had to get her in like legacy lifters. So I basically put her in stilettos, and like to kind of get her so it's the point where the knees sort of high enough we can get glute contact. But on a depth generally, like I'm kind of waiting to see a precedent. Like we are training with longer range of motion. We are trying to get those elbows sort of deep enough, but the message has been so inconsistent. And like even conversations with refs in British powerlifting were all kind of a bit like, if I think the official message that got put out was if it is a acceptable or reasonable range of motion. And it was like, but that's so subjective.
Yeah.
It's like, and that's obviously just going to vary like referee to referee. Like, what do you deem to be an acceptable range of motion? And I know what you're trying to get at, that if it's close enough, just white light it, whatever. But kind of until we have, like, we've got British bench press, I think, in like 4 or 5 weeks.
Okay.
So we've got obviously our national bench press championships, and no one really knows how it's going to go.
It just sucks because bench press in itself is so variable from competition to competition and from country to country. So it's like, it's just going to be even worse now. And then someone like Australia, like we all know that local competition standard, the refereeing isn't as good as state competition, which isn't as good as national competition, which isn't nowhere near as good as world competition. So in Australia, we've already had our states and nationals, and these guys going to Malta have one more local comp if they want, which isn't going to be refereed hard. So by the time they get to Malta, they're all flying blind. Yeah.
I'm hoping we get more clarification like before then, like a specific, like this is where we're at. On the rule change, like I thought the easiest thing they could have done is either grip width or the timer. Is make the timer shorter for bench.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. The grip width, it does, but it doesn't, because obviously my biggest bench is Meg Scanlon. She can go like this and she still doesn't. And Danny, like one of Steve's, he's like right in, they don't reach it still. It actually makes it worse.
That's interesting. But yeah, like my view on it is they wanted to do this to increase viewership and watchability of powerlifting, right? Like, okay, we need this to be more mainstream acceptable. It needs to be watchable. We've got Eurosport for Worlds. We've got all of this.
Yeah.
And bench naturally slows down competitions because you have a full minute, you have these long setups. Drop the timer to 30 seconds. If someone can achieve an efficient arch and a safe unrack and control in 30 seconds, fair play, power to you. Speeds up the meet.
I've never actually heard that. I've heard the grip width change should have been in, touch and go should have been in, but I've never heard just make it 30 seconds.
Just shorten the timer, right? Like, yeah, it makes it a little bit more stressful. Yeah, it makes the pace a little bit more. But like, if we're trying to increase watchability of powerlifting, right, let's get rid of the long setups. If you can achieve an arch and be super technical doing that, great. Like, cool, right? That's a demonstration of skill, I think, at a top end. Like, wow, so-and-so can do this, but we get through those bench presses quicker and keeps that viewership up, rather than like you see it on streams and sort of the insights and stuff, that drop off when it hits bench. No one wants to watch a 45-second setup to watch someone just go.
Depends on the competition, though. Like, the more I've known, the more I know about bench press, the more I'm interested in it. But I understand, if you didn't know anything, you'd be like, "What the fuck? This is boring ass."
Yeah.
Watch the viewership on bench go up before we all get to compete next year.
Yeah.
Everyone's gonna be watching to wait and see how the calls are gonna be.
Yeah, I watched I watched a bit of the South African nationals, but no one had an arch. It was boring. So
I think a lot of people fucking watched it, to be honest.
Hey, what'd you say?
I think a lot of people watched it. They probably weren't expecting that many people. They probably crashed the live stream.
Yeah. Well, I think American bench press nationals is this weekend, and then Canadian junior nats is in a couple of about 5 weeks. I know that, so I'll watch them. But we've got a plan. We're going to flat back, and get on the board, and then play with it and see how we go.
Yeah,
that's
interesting.
That's the only thing you can do.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? There's a few, like say, local competitions over the next few weekends that I'll keep an eye on, like in British powerlifting. But I think it's going to be so variable, and I think a lot of referees are still in the dark themselves as well. So they should, in theory, obviously lean into favour of the lifter and go, okay, if it's in doubt, if it's close, right?
Yeah.
But I know a lot of those guys and girls who are like very close, or to what I'd perceive as being okay, but not sure. I go, okay, well, it's one red light. It shouldn't affect your press command. Keep your ass down. You'll be fine.
Keep your ass down.
2 whites and red. That's what we're going for.
Yeah.
That's like I'm on the one elbow's higher than the other.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm on the 2.5 white lights.
The 2.5.
Oh, man.
It's all we need. We just need to.
You just need two.
I get one white elbow, one red elbow, and then I just keep my ass down. We're good.
Yeah, and those small females, she just keeps her ass down. She'll be sweet because she can't see the elbows.
Yeah.
The plates are all cover the whole body, anyways. So tell us about your own training. How's it going at the moment?
Yeah, it's going good. So I'm stepping up to the 105 kilo class for the first time for the British.
Let's go.
I decided to start eating like an adult rather than drinking too much beer and not sort of training hard enough, because that sums up my 2022.
Steve did mention that you're probably going to drag me out for a drink in Malta.
Oh, absolutely. You've got no choice. You've got absolutely no choice. But last year wasn't my best year of like competing, right? Like I think there was a lot of kilos left on the table that I just didn't put out on the platform through either sort of like some pain management stuff, like just not executing, right? And I kind of looked at it and I went, right, I mean, I'm 5'11", like I shouldn't really be a 93.
Nope.
I was like, okay, especially now I coach like a reasonably high sort of level, sort of across the board. I go, okay, I can either hold myself at the 93 class because I feel like that's where I identify, and like my appetite lets me sit here really comfortably, or I put myself in the environment just to make long-term progress, right? Like it's one of those where I go, okay, I'm a very competitive person myself, like sports background prior to powerlifting, like that competing is important to me, and I go, okay, but almost coaching at that level now has allowed me to let go of that and just go, right, just eat and get stronger, right?
Yeah.
So the British is pretty low stress for me because there's zero expectations. Like I think my best at 93, 742 at 93. And it's like, I go, I'd much rather be talking about breaking 8 and doing more of that at 105 within the next sort of 12 months than trying to scrap and get a place in it at 93, which probably requires that anyway at the standard at sort of GB. Like I think you're looking at top 5 93s are all sort of knocking around 800 plus. Obviously you've got Christian who did 842 at Euros, but outside of that there's a lot of boys in and around that 800 range. I go, just eat and get bigger and get stronger. That's kind of where I'm at now, pain-free, in a good place, and just building some momentum again now, which is nice after a year of not eating enough and drinking too much.
It's definitely owning a business. It's definitely the smartest choice to be able to fuel yourself while you're training, for sure, because of the stress that's involved with running a business. So yeah, that sounds like the smarter choice on your end. Yeah,
it definitely, like the coaching in the business side definitely took precedent over the last sort of 12 months, and I think that sort of shift, and like I think it's something that's not spoken about a lot in powerlifting too much, is like you start talking about identity, like are you a lifter, are you a coach, are you a meat promoter, right? Like I think people very much end up sitting in camps and when one picks up and becomes super busy, it's like, okay, like what you're like known for in that. And I very much felt that shift for me in the last year, where it's like when we launched EST, I was like, oh, Owen's a good lifter. Oh, Andy coaches. And then it shifted around. I was like, oh, and a coach, oh, he does lift as well. Like he's an all right lifter. Like, and I think as a competitive person, mentally that switch was quite difficult to deal with.
Yep.
Whereas now it's like, okay, cool. Like I'm gonna do some more bicep curls. I get to eat some more food and see what happens. And I think for me long term, like I could be a very good 105. So it's just, and equally, I think 800 at 105 places you in Britain very similar to where it would do at 93.
Yep.
Because you've got your top three. Obviously, you've got Sam White, you've got Abdul Majid, you've got Ben, who are all sort of in those late 800s. And then the standard at 105, like I don't think it's as deep as it is at 93. Like it drops off to around that 800 mark.
Yep.
Even at like 4th, 5th, 6th, right? And I go, okay, position of long-term progress, like more food, growing, potentially the same placing with the same total. A class up, it's just a no-brainer. Just a no-brainer. So just building some momentum, having some fun. Recently switched to conventional, which is an interesting experiment. We'll see how that lands, but it's positive so far. It's positive so far. It's so much harder. So much harder.
Steve had a little stint with conventional recently.
I was never changing though. I just had to.
Let's go back.
I'm like a fucking brick though.
Oh yeah. You're either good at it, you can get better at it.
Yeah.
You can get better at it, but it's definitely when you're at your level, Steve, you're either a conventional or a sumo. There's no doing both.
Yeah, that's it. No.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. It was too hard.
Yeah. Oh, and tell us about the repping at Euros, because we were watching and like it was a bit weird. It
was weird. It was a tough one because you're there as a coach and you're there like obviously it was an experienced coaching team, like they're all have been at internationals before and we looked at it and it was you almost kind of second guess yourself a little bit. When a few of those calls sort of happened early doors, it was you're there in the warm-up room like watching someone warm up squatting, okay, that's depth, but like I need you to do more. And like we're just on people like a hawk. We just had to be. And it was really harsh. Like probably the harshest call like that I specifically remember is I don't know whether you watched any of the 83 juniors, but like Nathan Gaval's third squat. I watched it. It was the grind of his life, bless him. And like I watched it, I was like, I thought it was his deepest of his 3 squats. And you kind of like, it's really hard to keep lifters in a comp mentally as soon as they feel like calls like that are happening. But I think there was a lot of ref exams at Euros as well. There was just a few examples and it's very rare. Like I'm not the coach that's like, oh, it's the ref's fault. It's this, the calls are bullshit. Like I very much like, it is what it is. They're external variables you can't control. Just roll with it. Like that's sport. But some of the calls, I was like, it was just really hard because they just weren't good at all. I had, again, a Kate Baxter, the girl I used as an example earlier, got told like press instead of the start command. At one point with one of the benches. It was just a bit of a nightmare. It was a weird comp. It like the standard of lifting was great. And I think if it was consistent day to day, you kind of go, that was real rough, but we're at an international lift to the highest standard, put it beyond doubt.
Yeah.
I did feel there was some inconsistencies there, which then on a coaching standpoint made it really difficult to know what to expect and ask of your lifters. And then you throw the rogue rack into the mix, which is
I did wonder about that rogue rack.
It's an absolute nightmare. The pad is lovely, right? If you've ever used like those standalone like fat pad benches that are like they've almost got like a rubber mesh on top.
Yeah, I'd use them.
They're so grippy and they're so lovely, and the pad's got a little bit more squish than an Alico. But the rack itself is so wide, it's so close to like the plates.
Yeah.
I had a lad in the junior 120s like miss his third bench because he got caught on the pin.
Yeah.
So
the pins are so fucking big too.
plate just hits the pin, and his left side goes, and he's just like, he couldn't push anymore because it was stuck underneath the pin for the rack height, because it's just that big and that wide.
You're right.
Obviously, you see the amount of people who had one in. It's such like, I think if you don't clatter it, it feels really nice to squat out of, because it's so heavy and cumbersome. It's almost like squatting out of a sort of big power rack, because you can really dig in. But it's so wide, it was just such a nightmare for people to deal with as a variable. And like, we ended up like, they only had one other rogue rack, which was they used for rack heights, obviously. And we just ended up warming up lifters on the rack height bench for like bench, because we knew no one else was doing rack heights, because it was that different to like the Eleco or like the Eleco dupes in the warm-up room. It's like, we to prep you, whether it's if people are taking handouts, setting them up further down the bench so they're away and clear of the pins, because the amount of people that were hitting them. I think one of our 74s, the junior Antoine, like he hit the pin a couple of times as well. Like there were so many little variables, whether it's through the referees, whether it's through the kit. And the amount of times I was back and forth to that jury, to the point where like I stopped going and we started sending other people, because there was one day where I was like, they just don't like me. I said, I'm walking up and asked you again. No,
we just get out of here.
Just started sending different coaches. Like, is it an Owen thing? No, it was a weird comp. It was a weird comp. Like, the result was great for GB. GB women's, I think, took second. I'm gonna get butchered if I've got that wrong. And the men's team won. Like, I think it's a huge result. Like, and I think representative where the standard of GB is. Like, whilst France obviously didn't have a good Euros, like, but by their standards at all, which obviously opened that door for us.
Yeah.
Because I think points were the same, first places were the same, but it was actually Christian silver medal that won the men's team, because I don't think France had any silvers. I think it represented the fact that we're in that conversation, and under those harsh standards, like Mo again. Mo, if he'd have pulled that third, would have won, like, and arguably could have placed higher, but he was like, no, I want to go for it, because that's just Mo all over.
Yeah.
You go, okay, cool. We look towards Malta. We look towards the team we could take, because it is quite a young team across the board as well. It's not like we didn't take Tony Cliff as an example, who did 9:43 in November at it's the Northwest champ, so it's like a state championships is the best way I can describe that, right? He did 9:43 for his qualifying total at under 120, and water cut with beer. He's my hero. And that's not even a joke either. Like,
beer.
Yeah, that's not even a joke. Like, he was like, I just need to dehydrate. I think it drops like 5 kilos overnight. It's mad. I loved it.
How much beer did he drink?
And then next day does 9:43. Yeah, it's mad. So like we didn't take TC to South Africa, because I think TC had a kid last year, so it was very much like he had that, and I think obviously there was the World Games and stuff as well that he sort of had to deal with. Like, whereas this year he's coming in to do the Raw. Obviously we got Kieran Gray, like European champ, like, who didn't do Worlds. Obviously both 120. It's whether we take both of those. Obviously there's Inderaj who did Euros. Like, there's so much depth across, and there's people that didn't go with like South Africa for various reasons, and I go, okay, we take that core of the young team that is like there, and then we add in like the experience of someone like a TC. We add in like those sort of, I don't want to say fill the gaps, I don't want to disrespect any sort of other athletes, but like we bring those people in that just elevate the team. And I go, okay, this year, next year, all these people stay on form, and it just looks very exciting. Very, very exciting, especially like Nathan Gabal coming out of the juniors, probably eventually, like, again, as a 83, maybe a 93 if he decides to come up. You got James Adcock. James Adcock gets healthy. That's extra depth for 93s. Like, yeah, it gets a little bit silly. And like, I go through the names in my head and I go, oh, okay, actually, like, yeah, it would be really interesting. I'm really excited to see where the standard just goes over the next like year or two because of that. Like,
yeah,
it's like us as well.
Yeah, I just wish that Australia wasn't so far away. Do you know what I mean? To have access to all of those competitions in that 1 year that, you know, that you guys have access to would be so good to just continue to raise the standard, you know. But it's happening. We'll get there. It's happening. So will you be coaching on the Malta team?
So I need to speak to Henry about it. I'd like to think so. I don't think I made any major cock-ups across South Africa, sort of junior and Poland. But that's kind of down to him and whether he wants to select how he wants to select his team. I'll likely go out for the holiday anyway. It's not that far. I can get an Airbnb. Good bit of powerlifting, a good social anyway.
I love how it's not that far for you, and here we are trekking over the other side of the fucking planet.
Oh yeah, so I'd like to hope so, because I do really enjoy the international coaching side of things. Like, again, coming from a bit more of a sports background, it's the closest thing to a sport powerlifting feels to me.
Oh yeah,
is when you're at that sort of level. Like, I think nationals is the same. Like, when you end up in sort of little battles and things like that with people, but like at the international side of things, like I think that's where I go, okay, this feels like a sport. I like this.
Yeah,
and it's the thing I love about powerlifting, and the thing I dislike about it the most is sort of how supportive and friendly it is. I love it, right? I absolutely love that anyone can come in and it's all about totals and personal progression. But at a certain point, it's got to be a sport and it's got to be a competition.
100%.
And like embracing that competitive nature. And like, I think I go, okay, you go to an international and it's that gamesmanship. It's attempts, it's numbers, it's just standing in the way of the screen and all those little things like in the back. I love that competitive side of things and how it feels.
Yeah, we had a taste of that here, and Steve's had that before. I haven't really had that experience in nationals that here last year, and I fucking loved it. It was so much fun, just trying to beat other people. I really enjoy that as well.
It's just the extra dimension to things, and I think like, yeah, if I can, I'd absolutely love to. And then obviously, like, I use handling Ben at obviously both Worlds and Euros as an example, like being able to share that with like a really good friend of mine and being there in their corner and stuff. Like, I think that just adds an extra dimension to it. It's just great fun. It's just great fun. Like, it's stressful, and I always lose weight at these things, but
dehydrating every day, mate.
More beers.
More beers. That's it. Yeah. That's how I get my calories in. You see, I just flat by the end of it. I'm not as much of an alcoholic as Ben puts out. He's just the worst.
Ben wasn't the only one who put it out, mate. Steve's already put it out.
Oh God, that's not good.
All right, well, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks heaps for coming on. It was really good to chat differences in the powerlifting scene over there to here, and we're really looking forward to hanging out with you guys in Malta. I think it's going to be a really fun powerlifting event, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me on. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I enjoyed this morning, and yeah, we'll get those beers in. And I'm not an alcoholic.
Thanks, Owen.
Pleasure, guys. Talk soon.